Hi, I'm following along with Paul McWhorter's Raspberry Pi Pico W lessons. We're on number 20, and it's an introduction to the DHT11 temperature and humidity sensor. And he gave us homework to have a toggle button, a momentary button as a toggle between Celsius and Fahrenheit. And that's what the homework was. And I noticed I looked at several other people that have already submitted homework videos, and a couple of them were saying that their button wasn't as responsive as they thought it should be. And that just has to do with the fact that we only want to hit the sensor up for readings every 1 or 2 seconds. So you're, if that's the only time you're updating your print statements, then you're not going to read a button press, or you'll read a button press, but it won't show up as changing from Celsius to Fahrenheit until you actually do the read and the print. So I knew I could work on that and get it a little bit different, so I working better. So that's what I did for my homework. So the code is pretty much same as Paul did. We're importing pin from machine time, and also the DHT library as well. I decided to make a function, get data function, because it just made it easier for me to understand a little bit. The thing about functions is if you're going to have variables in there, you're going to have to make them global, or if you're using a list, which is I decided to use a list, and a list isn't really global, but it's treated as global as far as I can see. They don't call it global in the documentation, but it works out that it basically is, so you don't have to make it global. The thing is you have to, you're going to index through the list instead of for, for your temperature and your, humidity and everything. And I have a fourth thing here where I'm just doing a counter. Each time we read, it updates. So if your temperature and humidity don't change, a lot of times you can't tell in your code if it's or on your printout if it's actually doing what you think it's doing. So if you have something, at least something, one thing that changes every time, you'll know that at least it's going through and it's going through that function up there. So the rest of it is um, just we're getting the pull up button here that we're going to use. We have the D data pin. I use pin 28 for that, and Paul showed us using the internal pull down resistor on that, which seems to work fine. And so we're calling our DHT object S is all sensor S. I like shortening things as much as I can. So my DHT sensor is called S. You do have to initialize the list here. So D is equal to a 4-position list. So that's it. For our button, handling our button, we got the button state and the old button state. And then we also have a Boolean Celsius Fahrenheit, which switches in between it, which keeps track of whether it's on Celsius or Fahrenheit, depending on, whether it's 0 or 1. And I think another thing that a couple people might have had trouble with is Paul put in this time sleep after you declare your object. You need to let it initialize itself, I think. And if you give it this second of sleep, it seems to work. If you leave this out, so I got an error. I left it out too. I said, well, why do we really need that? And I found out you end up with an error at it. So also, like I said, and I want data every time I print. So before I go into my while true loop, I'm going to do my get data. So all that does is call this function and populates the D list with values. So that's what that does the first time before we even get to our while true. We also have to initialize our previous time. So the way to make your buttons responsive is to put your call to your sensor read in a blink without delay type thing. In Arduino, you use millis, but in MicroPython, you have this time.ticks milliseconds, which works similar to millis. So you have to record that first. So that's our previous time. And then we get down in here to our while true. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to read our button state and then wait 50 milliseconds to let the settle down. And then we're going to check and see. I forget who it was, but one of the persons that was doing the buttons, toggle buttons, came up with this, that you can just use a less than in there. So, you know, both of these are only going to be Booleans, so they're going to be 0 or 1. So the button state, we want this to be true as a button press. I'm not looking for a release. I look for a press. I'm not a fan of the waiting for a release. So when a button is pressed, it's going to go to 0. And just before it was pressed, it should have been a 1. So that's the old state. So when the old state is when the old state is greater than the new state, so that only happens if both of them are 0, they're not going to be less than. If both of them are 1, it's not going to be less than. If button state, when you release it, button state's going to go back to 1, and this is going to be 0. The old state's going to be 0, and that's not the case there. So I forget who he was, but when I saw it, I said, wow, that's so much simpler than doing the and. Normally you use the and in there if something's 1 and something's 0, then do something. But this just makes it so simple. I love it. So, and then what we're doing is we're just changing the CF Boolean from true to false, or 0 to 1. So we're doing that. And then you have to set your old state to whatever the button state was. Now we're getting down in here to where we got this thing. And all we're doing is if we took a reading of our previous time up there. So we're taking the current ticks milliseconds and the previous time, and we're seeing if the difference you have to use this ticks differential, and if the difference is greater than 2000 milliseconds or 2 seconds, then we're going to do this get data. And so we're going to go read our function and update our list. And then you also have to reset the ticks milliseconds, so that previous time, so that, up here, so you're resetting that again. And then, so that's only happening, that's doing that on its own, and that's only doing it, this only happens every 2 seconds. But while true is running through here, and as fast as it can update, we got the 50 millisecond up here for letting the button debounce itself. And then you got this, then we're doing, if CF is true, then we're doing this one, else we're doing this one. So I did my print statement a little different than Paul did. And I had looked at this before in using the F strings, and the R, I was probably one of the first on Paul's group to /R so that you don't get that keep reading or whatever. But the cool thing about an F string is all you do is you have one string. You only actually have one set of here, and you're not concatenating all of it together. It's doing it on its own. You're just leaving these F string placeholders, these curly brackets. And well, you got this one here is for D0, which is actually temperature in Celsius. And you also have to put this in your when you're doing your character for that degree sign, you have to put it in curly braces as well, because that calculates the, or just tells it, does the math or the work to get that in there right. And then you just see, and then the comma and any spaces you leave in here are going to be shown, and then same way spaces. But then we're going to do humidity, and we got the percent sign, and then I'm also keeping track of that count. So that's the 3 position. And if you notice, we missed the 1 position in there, but we got that N/R. And then, so if we want in Celsius, it's just 0, but if we want the temperature in Fahrenheit, we're calculating it and we're just displaying it as 1, and then doing the same thing for the rest of it. Anyhow, that's basically what we got. And let's go ahead and get this over here. I don't know, I might still be running. I'm gonna go ahead and stop. And we'll run again. And you'll see we started off in Fahrenheit, so we got that. And every 2 seconds, this counter is going to increment. That's showing us that the it's going through this function up here. So it is actually going through the function. So it's a little debugging that we can do. If you had an actual display, you might want to take that out or something and take it out of your print statements. But then if you want to switch over, you can see, watch it, I'm going to switch, and it's going to be almost instantaneous. Pressing, 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 press. And you can see I'm actually can press twice in between here. So press. So I pressed twice in between the time it went from 22 to 23 or whatever it was. So I have a responsive button, and we're doing what we got to do and everything. So, and like I say, this is actually printing out probably every 50 or 60 milliseconds. It's actually printing out, however long it takes to do that. Like I say, the only delay that we have in here is our delay for debouncing the button. So when we read the button, we want it to debounce. We don't want to read too quick on that button. So that's my homework for this week, and hope maybe other people can get something out of it. Like I said, I know Paul's covered it in some of his lessons, but in Arduino, we call this blink without delay, because you first thing you learn in Arduino is delay, and the first thing you learn in MicroPython or Python is sleep, and then you find out, oh, they're not the best thing to use because it stops your program from continuing doing other tasks while you're doing it. Now, there's other ways of doing that. There's timers that you could use on this, but even the fellow that used the interrupt for his button, it got the interrupt right away, but because he was only printing out on when he was reading a new read off of it, it was still not, the button wouldn't switch over to the Fahrenheit or Celsius, because he wasn't updating his display as fast as any faster than he was reading. Anyhow, that's my homework. Thanks, Paul, for all you do. Have a good day, everybody.